We call this meeting to order. Michael, you want to take roll call? And let's pledge allegiance. There's a public comment. It's for anything that's not in the agenda. If you wish to speak, you may do so, and you'll be limited to 3 minutes. So if anybody wants to speak on something that's not in the agenda, step forward. No one? Public comment closed. We go to the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, if we could please remove item number 4 from the consent agenda.
Okay, item number 4 remove.
Mr. Chair, if there's no further discussion, I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Okay.
Yes.
Byron, you said pull number 4. Did you want it continued? And do you need a motion?
We're not going to continue it. We're just removing it from the agenda. It's something that we will deal with administratively.
Okay, so no motion needed. All right, sorry. Go ahead.
All right, I make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All in favor?
Second.
Oh, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 5, and that's,
Yes, regarding the draft tree ordinance, it was before the Planning Commission at the last meeting. At that meeting, the Planning Commission suggested some changes, which I believe have all been made on the draft ordinance, including the ability to have it heard directly by the Planning Commission when 3 or more trees are going to be removed. And also I changed an issue of the civil penalties, indicating that that there's a civil penalty in trouble the amount of the retail or replacement value of the tree, not to exceed the maximum civil penalty allowed by law. We also cleaned up the definition of urban residence and just instead referenced RM and R1 zoning. Then we went to the Parks and Rec Commission on March 10th. They wanted additional protection. They had 2 main concerns. They wanted additional protection for exemplary species, landmark, and historic trees. And they wanted a review by the through the review process, the permit process, even for those trees that were within the fenced-in side yards. They also wanted to make sure that the public was aware of this ordinance after its adoption. And then there was a third point that was seriously debated back and forth about whether there should be a side and backyard exemption, but then they decided to allow that side and backyard exemption to stay. But there was different points of view on the Parks and Rec Commission whether that exemption should exist or whether it shouldn't exist. But they were mainly concerned with the exemplary species, landmark, and historic trees. After the Parks and Rec Commission, if you look on attachment 1, which is on page 3, I had some changes to the draft ordinance that the Planning Commission could consider, including adding another definition, trees of special protection, which would include heritage trees. And this has come from the City of Danville's definition of heritage tree. Any tree, regardless of species, which has a trunk diameter of 36 inches or greater when measured 4.5 feet from the ground. A tree that's shown to be preserved and approved on a development plan or specifically required by the Planning Commission to be retained as a conditional approval. A tree required to be planted as mitigation or replacement for removal of a protected tree, or a landmark tree, which is any tree or grove of trees or type of tree designated by resolution of the Board of Supervisors to be a historical or cultural value, an outstanding specimen, unusual or native species, and or of significant community benefit. That allows the Board of Supervisors to have some discretion in the future, should it want to say, you know, this grove of trees is special, this type of tree is special, and we haven't narrowed it down today about which special species of trees would be protected, but it allows the board to do that without actually amending the ordinance. They could do that by resolution. But it does provide specific protection for those heritage trees that are large trees and older trees. So the effect of that is that any of those trees of special significance are not going to be subject to the 1 tree per parcel removal. So that takes away that exemption for those trees of special protection. And also, the trees of special protection would not be exempt by being in the virtue of being in a fully fenced back or side yard. Now, I've actually presented 2 Exhibit 1s behind the draft resolution. The first, Exhibit 1, does not have the changes that were specified in Attachment 1, the ones that were suggested by the Parks and Rec Commission. The second, Exhibit 1, has the changes specified that were raised by issue of the Parks and Rec Commission. So the Planning Commission will have to choose one of those Exhibit 1s that it would like to proceed. So we're asking the Planning Commission to decide whether you'd like the changes that were specified or recommended by the Parks and Rec Commission, or whether you'd like to proceed with the ordinance without those changes. And then we'd ask the Planning Commission to adopt the resolution recommending adoption of the ordinance to the Board of Supervisors. Do you have any questions?
No. Commissioner Lowe, any questions?
No, not at this time, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Barbara, I only have one attachment 1.
There's only one Attachment 1, but if you go back behind the resolution, behind the ordinance, there's 2 Exhibit 1s. One is Exhibit 1, and then there's a second Exhibit 1 that says with changes specified in Attachment 1. So there's 2 exhibits behind that resolution. So it's 2 versions of the ordinance, and we're going to figure out which version of the ordinance that the Planning Commission would prefer.
Okay, there's the first, let me see if I understood that. So there's attachment 1,
Yeah, and then you go way
and then
back.
there's exhibit 1, which is a redlined ordinance, right?
Yes.
Or resolution, rather.
Yeah, there's a redlined ordinance.
Okay. And then,
There's the, it would have been helpful if I'd put page numbers on it. Then there's the actual resolution that's going to be adopted by the Planning Commission.
okay. So which one of
And
these,
behind that resolution are the 2 versions of the ordinance. The first one's Exhibit 1, and then if you keep going back, then there's Exhibit 1 with the changes specified in Attachment 1. So there's two Exhibit 1s behind the resolution. I'm sorry, they don't have page numbers on them.
It's on the first line.
Exhibit 1.
where's that?
It's behind this. Changes.
I got that. Okay. So the one that says Exhibit 1 with changes specified in Attachment 1,
Yes.
those are changes that were suggested by the Parks and Recreation
Yes,
Committee?
they didn't actually have the specific changes in front of them. They gave me ideas for consideration for special heritage
Right.
trees and stuff. And so that includes the changes that came out of that meeting with the Parks and Rec Commission.
Are reflected in this thing?
That's
Okay.
the second one.
Okay. How did you treat the whole issue of a sunset provision?
It does not have the sunset provision right now.
It's this, you took this, so
I took the
since we
sunset.
looked at this last time, we heard testimony of, I think, was overwhelming encouragement to take that out, and it was taken out?
Yes.
Okay. Those are all the questions I have right now, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Pierce?
I'd like to hear from the public.
So what would the commission like? Exhibit 1 or Exhibit 1 with the changes in specific attachment?
Well, should we do public comment and then decide? Wanna open it for public comment?
Okay, we're going to open it for public comment. Everybody wants to step up to the podium. Go ahead. And keep in mind, it'll be 3 minutes allowed.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Patty Spears. I live at 111 Donald Drive in Ridgemark, and I am here to ask that you approve the resolution to adopt the ordinance, and with this, especially without the sunset clause. If we've been going through this process for the last 6, 7 months. We might as well make it permanent. You know, of course, if there's changes that need to be made down the road, and then we make those changes versus having to start over again. Because I can assure you that there are quite a few people that have been affected by trees coming down that would be flooding your chambers again, and we'd just start over again. So it'd be best if we just go ahead and remove that sunset clause. That'd be great. I will say that I feel that in reading the resolution, there's sufficient checks and balances. I feel it's fair on both sides. And so adopting this would only make San Benito County it would keep it the desirable area that people want to call home. On a personal note, I was in Arizona last week, and I went from the neighborhoods of Chandler, beautiful, lots of development, you know, trees, just tree-lined streets. You wouldn't even think you were in the desert. Then I went into Mesa, you know, it was just like cement, dirt, graffiti, just a horrible. Now that's the desert. Then you go back to Chandler or Scottsdale, and it's beautiful again. So I definitely I know that trees make a big difference. It makes people happier, it makes the birds happier, everything's better with the trees. And so I think it's important that we do protect them, that we protect our property values and our community as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Question for you, Speaker. Did you read both Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 1 with changes?
I haven't seen the revisions, no. I saw the first ones that came out, and so the only change I know between the two is that the removal of the sunset clause.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
My name is Mel Tungate. I live at 104 Louise Circle. That's also in Ridgemark, not very far from where Patty lives. I have read both the proposed revisions. I definitely like the parks addition to it. I think it makes it a stronger ordinance. Also, the sunset clause being gone, I think is a major plus for exactly the reasons that Patty gave. I want to commend staff, Planning Commission, Parks Commission, the Board of Supervisors for the work they've done on this. We took a pretty sad situation. I think we've made a better county because of what we've done. And it's been a pleasure to see the work and to see what's happened with it. Now we'll have the situation if someone wants to cut down a bunch of trees, they're at least going to have to ask about it and have to come to you about it and have to do the proper procedures, and I think that makes it a better county. We can breathe easier. There's a lot to what Patty said in terms of concrete versus trees. There's been studies done, aerial studies of pleasant places to live, and unanimously people, when they are around trees, is a much more pleasant place to live. If you have questions. Good to see you again, Miss Lowe. Haven't seen you in a decade or two.
She's back.
Anybody have any questions? No? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Penny Betancourt. I live at 633 Marks Drive, which is also in Ridgemark. I'm going to thank you for allowing us to address the Commission this evening. We're pleased that members of the Commission and the Parks Department recognize the value in having a tree ordinance. I'm very pleased that the Parks Department appears to have recommended edits that expand the protection to save even more trees. As planned communities grow out to and within the county jurisdictions, the value of a tree ordinance will continue to serve for years to come. And I was going to say if not for the sunset clause, but it sounds like that there is progress there. I could say for decades in life of a tree if the sunset clause is not in there. I ask that you send your overwhelming support to the Board of Supervisors so that we can rest assured that many trees that have struggled to survive what seems to be an endless drought and many other acts of nature will not be destroyed unnecessarily. Thank you again for your support. Do you have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bill Healy. I live at 1335 Sunny's Way in Ridgemark. I want to compliment all of you for having the foresight to be able to want to save trees for the future generations. I came from a city, and I went to school, and there was not a piece of green on it except for a little weed that grew up between the houses. And that was in San Francisco, and I moved to the peninsula, and at one time there was nothing but redwood trees there, and they're almost all gone. So past people have let the trees be taken out. I pray that we don't do that. It gives us the fresh air that we have. It gives us the beauty that we have. And we should never, ever have to get rid of one. And with your guys' agreement, even when they plan the next homes being built or whatever, they'll have to take consideration into the trees instead of just bulldozing them down. And to Barbara, thank you. The sunset was perfect. Okay? Thank you. Any questions? I'm sorry.
No, thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Janetto, and I live at 1177 Ridgemark Drive. One comment I wanted to make was, as you all know, Ridgemark has got many bird sanctuaries. They have it on the internet and so forth. You're all aware of the bird sanctuaries there?
No, I'm sorry.
You're not? Well, they advertise it on the internet. So knowing that there's bird sanctuaries there, my main concern with that is that when anyone wants to take trees down, I know they're going to have to go through a proper procedure now, which I really respect. But in the case of the sanctuaries, the trees around ponds and everything should really be considered before ever removing any trees from a sanctuary. That's all I have to add. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice hat, Johnny.
My name's Jean Ken, and to add to what he said, we're an Audubon sanctioned sanctuary for the birds. We, about 5 years ago, went through the process of applying for that, and we have bird boxes all around the course. And the idea is to keep our ecosystem going. But what I want to talk about is, and it's selfish, I have asthma. In San Jose, Santa Clara County, why they have tree ordinances is for the air quality. The minute you go over the Coyote Pass, you can see, when you get through Coyote Valley, there's just a pall there. And here we are, we're allowing all these developers to come in that had their, they had their allotments from when we had the problem with the sewers. And it's fine, they have the right to develop, but we need to preserve the trees we have so that we don't end up like there and lose our air quality, because that's one of the reasons it's so nice down here. You can breathe. And for someone like me with asthma, that's very important. And so I would like you to think about keeping this ordinance in perpetuity, because the more people we bring in here, every house is going to have at least 2 cars, probably 3. And you can say, well, the developers have to put a tree on every lot. Well, I used to live in LeBeg, and half those trees died. The people didn't care for them, and being in a lawn isn't optimal anyway. So we really do need to think about what we're giving to our future generations. Are we giving them clean air? Are we giving them something they can breathe? So that should also be considered. And thank you.
Mr. Chair, just for clarification for the public, the Planning Commission at our last meeting took the sunset clause out, so there is no sunset clause in this ordinance.
Any more speakers? I guess we close that. Commissioners, what's the wish?
Well, I'll just get the ball rolling by way of comment. I like the Parks and Recreation input and the suggested changes. I like the addition of the trees of special protection and the definitions of those. So I personally am inclined to go with the proposed ordinance that has the changes reflected from the Parks and Recreation Committee.
Pat, would you?
I agree with,
I concur as well.
Okay, then we'll go with,
I can make a motion, Mr. Chair.
okay.
I make a motion that we adopt the resolution recommending to the Board of Supervisors the adoption of a permanent tree protection ordinance by amending Article 7 of Chapter 25.29 of the San Benito County Code with the amendments set forth on Attachment 1, which are incorporated into Exhibit 1 with changes specified in Attachment 1.
Anybody second?
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried.
Thank you. It's our intention to have this before the Board of Supervisors on April 7th, and it will be scheduled for a 9 o'clock. To the best of my knowledge, it will be scheduled for a 9 o'clock public hearing. At that time, we're going to present this as the recommendation of the Planning Commission, and then the board will decide whether they want to make any changes to the ordinance at that time or not, or whether they'll just accept it. So that's good. Thank you
Okay.
very much for the action today.
Thank you for your hard work on this, Barbara, and thank you for the community. It's kind of a nice example for when government works. I know we all get real frustrated watching the news and hearing how broken government can be, but it's nice to see when government works and when community representation works the right way.
Also, Barbara, would you please take this to Parks and tell Parks Commission that we went with their recommendation?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next one. It's use permit 1103-14 for a tower. Michael Kelly, is that
Yep.
your project?
That's mine.
Okay.
Just take a moment to set this up here. And maybe take a moment to wait for the...
They don't want to hear about your cell tower, Michael.
Yes.
It's not going to look like a tree. It's going to look like a water tower.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Michael Kelly, Associate Planner. I'm here to talk about use permit 11615 for a cell phone tower at 1872 Shore Road. It is a tower that is intended to look like a water tower, and you'll see images of that shortly, and you've seen it in your staff report too. It's right here at the bend in Shore Road between Lake Road and Lover's Lane at Tequisquita Slough, right near there, near the bridge over the slough. There's another view of it right here. This is northward, and it's next to the road. I don't know if you can see this, but you have it in your staff report anyway. The tower would be located at the northwest side of the property on a lease area, about 200 feet or so away from the residents on the property. And just another view, more detailed, there would be an easement that runs, an easement that would run to the property, and another easement that would have potentially utility, things like lines in there. Again, unfortunately hard to see, so maybe I'll just move on, but this is supposed to be an image of the lease area. And an image of the equipment area. It's about, it is 2,500 square feet of lease area, and it would evidently make room for possible future co-location. The lease area and the space for the equipment would not be completely full, but there it is. It would be fenced in with slats, with tan-colored slats to obscure the view inward. And here is a diagram of the water tower and false water tower. With inside at the top, it would have antennas, in there. And here are the antennas. There'd be 9 of them. And, well, anyway, moving on to illustrations. This is the view from Shore Road. If you're just west of the property. And there's the tower. At the top is before, without. At the bottom is with. And as you see, here are the trees along the slough that somewhat softens there aren't a lot of trees in the area, just open flat land mostly, but along the slough, along the creek, there are trees that might somewhat soften it, although that's up to you to decide if that's helpful. Anyway, there are structures, of course, the residence and the other structures on the property in the view from here, which is right there at the driveway, approaching kind of just east of the bend in the road and the crossing of the slough. And you'll, of course, see the water tower there in this simulation, provided by the applicant. The simulation is provided by the applicant. And another view, a little bit washed out, but that's, well, if you like, I can turn out the lights. But another view of the false water tower with the trees of the creek in front of it as viewed from Lake Road. So this this tower was selected by the applicant, as I mentioned in the staff report, from a set of a few different sites, some places that where the owners of the property simply weren't interested, and they didn't say, they just weren't interested in this. And a few other sites where the owners were interested, but the applicant decided that, or the RF engineer for the applicant, according to what was submitted in the application, decided that they weren't optimal comparatively relative to this site, and to have it at this site would achieve their objective of coverage. And it is within 200 feet of the property, or the residence on the property. It is, it's not within 500 feet of any other residence, not within 500 feet of any residence that is off the property. I believe the nearest residence is off the site, not recalling how close it is, but it is not within 500 feet. But this, as you'll recall, has been done before, such as the one that was down the road on Fairview that was brought before you last summer. And of course, as you also recall, the stealth design is, of course, very much favored by the ordinance, and as has been discussed at these meetings, it's very much favored here too. And so, as you see, they provided that stealth design. So I'll just say that I'll give you the recommendation, and we can take questions. The staff recommends that the Planning Commission review the staff report, hold a public hearing, hear any proponents and opponents of the proposed project, and recommends that you approve the use permit subject to the findings and the conditions of approval in the staff report.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question of staff. Michael, do we have an ordinance that actually states 500 feet from a residence?
500 feet from a residential area, and depends on how you define residential area, whether it means actual individual residences or groups of residences, like a neighborhood. So it's not entirely the clearest language that could be in there. In this case, it could be interpreted to be, well, if the property owner is willing to have it within 500 feet, that's a choice of the property owner, but it wouldn't affect property owners off-site in terms of being closer than 500 feet. There's a condition of a deed restriction for the property owner to acknowledge that the issues of having this tower are understood. And that's kind of the
Yeah, it's been,
response to that.
it's been the interpretation of the Planning Commission since at least 2005 that if a property owner wished to have a tower on their property, that as the applicant, they did not need to abide by the 500-foot rule for their own residence, but they did have to be over 500 feet away from a neighbor. And that's been a consistent interpretation, but it is not codified.
But having been here since 2005, I can tell the commission that's absolutely right. And our reasoning for that was a property owner, a residential property owner, can bring a cell tower, or a cell tower to them, but we didn't want cell towers going to the residents. Does that make sense? So if it was, because there's a lot of science that went into, or alleged science that went into that about cell frequencies and the health dangers with that and so forth. So if a residential property owner wanted to put one in their backyard, they could do that if that's what they wanted to do. But we didn't want the cellular providers putting towers next to existing residences. That was different. I don't know if that makes sense.
Existing residents to other property owners or the same property owner?
The same, or, well, if it's the same, then presumably they're not going to be here in this chambers if they didn't agree to it, you know, because usually the property owner and AT&T and Verizon will strike a deal, and the residential property owner and Verizon, for example, will both show up and say, yeah, it's fine with us. But a different scenario would be if one of the cellular providers came in and applied for a tower, and it was on a piece of property where the property owner wanted to do it, but right over the parcel line, there's a house within 500 feet of that tower. And that resident said, no, I don't want this that close to me. Then the ordinance would prevent that.
And that's on the list of things to do, also to look at this ordinance, because this ordinance hasn't been updated for a while. And so we're going to probably have to look at the future, that 500 feet, and whether or not it should be reduced to 100 or 200, et cetera. So, but right now it does say 500 feet, and it's an older ordinance that's been around for a little bit.
I was under the impression it was going to be looked at a while back
We've
and
been
dealt with.
directed to put it on the top of our list, yeah.
Wasn't schools involved in this discussion somewhere?
Yes.
Wasn't there a specific number of feet for
1,500.
schools?
Yeah, it's the same section. It's 7.11.005. Talks about 500 feet of residential areas or 1,500 feet of public or private schools.
Okay, 1,500, okay.
And the federal law indicates that, you know, that we can't regulate the placement, construction of the wireless service facilities on the basis of environmental effects of the radio frequency emissions.
Right.
Because they do have to comply with the federal law on that. So it's presumed to be safe at the distances that would be off the site.
And all these leases run with the land, so if they chose to sell, you would have to run with the sale or not be able to sell it.
Which is why we put
the burden is all on
the deed notification on it.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, I just think as long as we're looking at the ordinance, that it's fine. You know, I just think an ordinance should be what we do, and then it's clear.
I had a question, Mr. Chairman. Michael, the last cell tower we did, as you may recall, we got into a lot of discussion about the height and what is it as short as it can possibly be, and so forth. Is this water tower as low to the ground as it possibly can be? Even the renditions look like it's pretty high up there.
Yeah,
85
well,
feet above grade.
it is proposed to be 88 feet. And I don't have enough technical expertise to say whether in this particular spot that is as low as it could be or higher than necessary. It is about the same, it is slightly taller than the one that was on Fairview that was proposed to be a I'd say it would probably be a matter of, well, when we take in these applications, we expect the applicant to provide lots of documentation on the rationale for the choice. In this case, well, I mean, as I said, staff doesn't have much expertise in terms of the engineering side of what goes into choosing the height. Maybe the applicant
Last
can.
time the gal from Verizon didn't know the answer to that. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah.
She said, "Oh, the triangulation guy or whatever the scientist's name was. He's not here, and I don't know." And remember, we said, "Okay, well, here's what we're going to do. You limit it to this height, and if that doesn't work, then come back. But for now, it's going to be limited to that height." And I
Yeah.
forget what that height was.
Well,
But
it was
it was a
one-
lot lower than what she wanted.
It was proposed to be 110 feet, as I recall, and it was dropped to 80.
To 80.
80,
To 80.
yeah. And this one is 88. So whether 8 feet is higher than desirable, or maybe for this location, even lower would be more desirable, that could be debated here.
Yeah, I remember from the last one, it was kind of out in the flats, nothing around it, so it was going to really stick out.
Yeah.
This one's a little more, you got the slough and you got some brush, and that'll all act like a screen, and what's above the screen will be what's kind of visible, 60 feet or whatever. I mean, seems like it's not as big a deal here, to me anyway.
Right. That's a good point. But I think isn't it fair to say that we as a commission and we as a community want these cell towers to be as short as possible, as opposed to, let's just, let's go, because even if it's supposed to be stealth, I mean, some pine trees just don't grow that tall. When's the last time anyone saw a pine tree 110 feet tall, or a water tower way up there? So if stealth is the objective, and to get it to look like something it's really not, then you have to emulate the thing it's trying to be, which in this case is a water tower. So I don't know how tall water towers usually are, but I don't think they're 85 feet up in the air.
No, they're
So
probably half that.
It's gonna what?
They're probably half that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen a water tower there.
Hmm?
You go down Highway 5, you see a water tower right there in Stockton. It looks pretty tall.
Yeah, for the city of Stockton's water tower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see it right there. It's tall. I mean,
Yeah, and they got like the baseball teams and stuff painted on it. That one. Yeah, that one's a pretty large water tower.
Shall we open it for public comment? Anybody from the public wish to speak on this item?
Well, I have speaker cards, and also the applicant is interested in speaking.
You
so-
want to, okay, the applicant first, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Jenny Blocker. I represent Verizon Wireless in this matter. Thank you so much for hearing us tonight. We are seeking your approval on this use permit. This is an 88-foot faux water tank. We do comply with the code. We talked a little bit about, or you just had a discussion a little bit about the height. I believe the county code is minimum functioning height. This facility is the minimum functioning height. We submitted coverage maps that I actually have copies of if you'd like to view them. Showing the facility or the coverage area without this facility, and then the coverage area with this specific facility at this height. Our RF engineers, our radio frequency engineers, take a lot of things into consideration, including topography, trees, surrounding facilities. They also implement something called a line of sight technology. So a lot of the facilities out in more rural areas have to be taller because they actually have to have a line of sight with actual headphone, the cell phone that's being operated. So I'm happy to provide those coverage maps for you now, or hopefully you've been distributed them previously. But this is the minimum functioning height necessary for this facility to cover the service gap that we are currently experiencing. Additionally, while we do seek your approval, I am going to be requesting that condition of approval number 14 be removed. This condition is a deed restriction, and you talked about it a little bit prior to me getting up here. And the condition number 14 states that prior to issuance of building permit, the applicant shall record a deed restriction stating that the property owner / developer is aware of potential issues regarding the placement of a wireless communications facility within 500 feet of the single-family dwelling. The reasons we are opposing this condition is that part of the process is we do enter into a lease with the property owner. A component of that lease is that we do file a memorandum of lease, meaning that there is a document that is recorded on title as a cloud of title, letting any sort of successor of interest of the property know that this facility is attached and runs with the land, as was mentioned by the commissioner. I did speak with staff prior to this hearing requesting that this condition be removed based on the fact that there is a memorandum of lease that is recorded on title. In addition, this facility is not seeking a variance to the code. We are in compliance with the code, though there is a residence located on the parcel that is not exceeding 500 feet. As the discussion has gone on, staff is still recommending approval, and prior facilities have been approved, even though the residence was on the parcel of the property owner who owned the tower. Adding some sort of redundant deed restriction or a cloud of title on this property is redundant and also overly burdensome for the property owner to have to do this. If staff would like to kind of expand, or council would like to expand about the reason of this sort of deed restriction, I'm open to hearing the explanation, but what I can assume or what I've been told is that it sort of puts successors on notice. And again, there is a memorandum of lease that is recorded that is attached to this parcel, and there's also actual notice, meaning anyone who wanted to purchase the property in the future can actually see the tower on the facility.
But you're not the property owner, so why do you care?
Well, we represent the client, and in the interest of,
The client's the property owner?
What's that?
The client is the property owner?
We represent the client being Verizon Wireless.
Right.
But there is an interest, yes, we also want to protect the interest of the property owner as well.
Is the property owner here tonight? Do you care if there's a deed restriction or not?
Can we have him come up to the podium to speak so we can have him on record?
Hello, I'm Chad Weaver. I could see it, as she was stating, being a double burden, that if it's on the title, when I resell the property, it makes it look like a negative thing. I've done my own research on it, and just driving around, you see them within 100 feet of houses all the time. So I think, on that note, that I don't see the purpose of having it double in there, but it was a very large contract they had me sign, and it stated it in there several times, so I was very aware of it. So, any questions on that?
I don't think that answers that.
Any questions from one?
Mr. Chair, no, I have a statement, though. Funny, you got an attorney and then you have a real estate agent on this commission. As a real estate agent, I see full disclosure even better, and release of liability to the landowner if something was to happen after the purchase. I see this not burdensome at all. I see it as a release of liability of the owner. Now, does that mean it might limit his buyer pool? Sure. But you don't want buyers in there unless they absolutely know what's going on and they're aware of what's going on, and they still choose to purchase anyway. And I like this in here.
Okay, if I may follow up, I believe that full disclosure is also important. And as mentioned, any sort of successor trying to come and purchase the property could visually see the tower on the property itself. And additionally, there is a requirement, it's already recorded on title, the memorandum of lease, explicitly stating that there is a long-term lease with Verizon Wireless. So not trying to hide the ball at all. And additionally, the property owner fully knows the lease agreement that they have entered into. So not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes, including any sort of successor wishing to purchase the property. I believe it's fully documented in full disclosure as it is.
I've got a comment. Well, the memorandum of lease is going to just outline the a summary of the lease between Verizon and Landauer. I don't know if it's going to get into county ordinances and 500 feet and so forth. And even actual notice of seeing the cell tower there isn't also going to let anyone know, prospective purchasers, about a county ordinance that says 500 feet. And that's my understanding of what the deed restriction would do. But here's the way I think you go accomplish what you're looking for to do, which is to eliminate it. Why do you need a deed restriction saying thou shalt not build a residence within 500 feet if the person who could be building the residence would be doing so voluntarily? And as you and I just said, Byron, we allow people to do that all the time. If that's what they want to do, that's what they can do.
Well, if we could suggest...
So why is it even necessary?
We're going to
if that's the direction the ordinance is going to go when we redo it,
And
sorry.
that's true, that's the direction the ordinance is likely to go, but, I mean, the fact is the ordinance still says within 500 feet of a residential area. So the county requires this restriction as a way to give us the out to go beyond the letter of the law. But in order to keep that in there while also respecting what's being discussed, if maybe we suggested that the language be changed to remove the statement potential issues regarding a placement, and just stating that the property owner is aware that there's a wireless communication facility within 500 feet of the single-family dwelling, that acknowledges where we're deviating from we're potentially deviating from the ordinance without hopefully putting an unnecessary burden.
Just keep it as bland, just factual as possible. Just say property or the wireless facility is located within 500 feet of a residential dwelling. Just put the notice out there.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is pretty standard language, though.
We have used
we
it.
have done this on many, many in the past. I really don't see a reason to change it.
May make one more comment. This facility, if we were seeking a variance of some sort that would have a negative impact maybe on future owners of the property, I could see how that would be definitely reasonable. But we are not seeking a variance. We are in compliance with the code. We have staff recommendation. I'm not quite sure why that has to be specifically articulated and have some sort of negative connotation associated with any future purchasers of the property. And again, I don't represent the property owner. I'm just, want to make sure that
Mr. Pierce?
it's a fair deal.
Well, I don't mean to be blunt, but it's not necessary that you understand. Okay? If we choose to have this finding because we feel that it protects the county, that's what our job is. Just like your job is standing up there and saying what you think. And I think this protects the county, and I think that's what we need to do with something like this. I don't think it's overly burdensome at all. I think it's just being conservative and being careful. So.
I agree with that.
You agree with that?
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, deed
with
restriction's not really going to put any burden on the property owner. It's just going to be there for the future, someone wants to buy the property. At least they're well aware of it, and there's going to be the other memorandum you're going to put on there, so, I mean, I don't see a problem with it. I think we should just leave it. I mean, that's, yeah.
I had a question about that.
Question?
So, changing topics a little bit, what's
Sure.
this tank going to look like?
Oh, so we provided photo simulations.
And I don't mean, I've got the ones in the staff report, but
Yes.
it's hard to tell. I mean, is it going to be galvanized? Is it going to be painted John Deere green? Is it going to say Go Baylors on it? What kind of water take are we talking about here?
So I have some better images if you'd like to see my hard copies.
Have you guys done these before?
Oh, yes.
This is the first one in our county, I think, though, isn't it?
Oh, really?
I think so.
Yeah, these are one of the more favorable designs. A lot of jurisdictions have kind of pushed us to do this design. It is about 4 times the cost of a normal facility, but, for an agricultural area, this seems to blend aesthetically the best.
Yeah, I like the idea.
Yeah, so I can present to you some kind of clearer copies, but we are open aesthetically. We chose a color that kind of blends in with what is there naturally. If you wouldn't mind passing this down. I believe we went with kind of a sand color water tank. a slimmer silhouette. We've done water tanks in wine country that kind of look like barrels. This is a much slimmer silhouette, kind of sleeker.
We want the wine barrel one.
You want the white one?
Yeah. Napa and Sonoma, they think they're so fancy.
That was actually in Livermore at Wenty.
Oh, at Winty? Okay. They think they're fancy too. Oh, that's nice. So this one would be just like that?
Yes.
And speaking of Billy Bob Loves Jolene and graffiti and so forth, is there a way of preventing people from climbing up here to paint on it?
Well, currently we do have a fence. We have a chain link fence that has, I believe, slats in it. We could add some sort of other safety mechanism, maybe a fence that isn't easily, well, slats actually make it less easy to climb.
I think
We could add barbed wire on
I mean,
top.
they write country songs about this. I'm not making it up. Painting the water tower is like
Oh,
a
really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So you might want to think about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we
if,
could-
if it does get graffitied, is that the lessor or lessee's responsibility?
Yeah, it is our Verizon's responsibility to clean it, yeah. We could add barbed wire. That's not something that is necessarily aesthetically pleasing, but if, you know, if that is the request of the planning commission, we could do that.
I think something on the bottom to act as a deterrent from kids getting up there to paint on it
Okay,
would probably be prudent.
sure.
Got an 85 foot in the air billboard
Yeah.
opportunity. Right?
I think Mr. Weaver's shotgun would be a good deterrent. It's actually, I drove the property. Yeah. Yeah, I drove the property, and actually it's fairly close to the house. They have a dog that pays attention, so I'm sure that, you know, they probably won't have too much trouble out there.
I think the design is preferably than the tree.
You like
I mean,
that better?
I like the design.
Yeah.
Makes it look like it blends in with the
Yeah.
farmland.
I like the concept a bunch. Because the fake trees are better than an ugly tower, cellular tower.
But
But you can
that's-
tell they're a fake tree. This, you know, hopefully you think, oh, maybe that is a water tower. Who knows?
Yeah, and the tree actually adds about 10% greater height on the facility to allow for that crown to make it look like an actual tree. So this allows for the least high structure while still being, you know, aesthetically pleasing.
Any more
Still waiting for
questions?
the 88-foot palm tree.
The palm tree?
The Rockefeller tree.
Are you okay with the clerk keeping those photos?
Yes.
Any more questions for the, we have speakers? Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Lorraine Whitaker, or Kenneth Jang.
Hello, my name is Dr. Kenneth Jang, and I have to say that out of all these things, I've actually been very up to date with a lot of the medical studies involved in radiofrequency radiation, and I have colleagues that are involved with it. I also know a lot of people who are in the executive world of the cell phone business. I'm not here as an opponent or proponent of the thing because I support Chad in his decision to put on the tower. But however, you know, my own good judgment is to say, I don't feel comfortable without having to address the panel to say what my concerns are. As of date, there are conflicting results in terms of is it safe, is it not safe. However, the World Health Organization in 2011 actually came out and stated that it is a potential carcinogenic, classifying in the same cases of lead and chloroform. NIH also did a study back in 2011 that actually shows that there is structural and functional differences in the brain after just 10-minute use of a cell phone. Now, the American Cancer Society says it's absolutely safe. The National Cancer Institute says it's absolutely safe. However, they all have a notation at the bottom that says, upon further studies to determine if it's actually safe. As a matter of fact, I only have 3 minutes, so I'm going to have to get straight to the point. Number one, I just wish that when they proposed this, this whole project, that they would at least do some environmental studies, because it is in the floodplain. It is also partially on a San Andreas fault, too. So it would be nice not to have all the stuff exempt. At least do some studies to say, hey, it's going to be absolutely safe. It's not going to affect Chad, who happens to live within 200 feet of this particular tower. Now, to go on further, a quick way that what some of my colleagues says, the best way to determine and tell you in 3 minutes how best to say how safe this is. Dr. Sanjay Gupta, a neurosurgeon on CNN correspondent, actually, if you YouTube Dr. Sanjay Gupta, you have 5 minutes of a video. It tells you quite decent amount of information, a lot of people who are actually involved. As a matter of fact, a particular study done by Neil Cheney, who actually looked at radio frequency radiation. And the best thing they can compare it to is not from cell towers, because to date, there is not a solid study studying the effects of cell tower and resonance. And this whole ordinance of 500 feet and 1,500 feet, I can tell you, the particular distances that they looked at is way more than that. And specifically, Dr. Neil Cheney did a study on radio frequency towers and television towers from early 1930s to late 1980s. And the things that they found in people with children with different types of cancers, their rate actually increased 500%. 500%. And that's a distance of 3 kilometers, about 2 miles. Okay? So they've also done some other studies. The Hardell and Company, they also did some studies on World Health Organizations. And specifically, they looked at people who use cell phones for 10 years for at least 1 hour a day. And their risk for different types of gliomas, astrocytomas, acoustic neuromas, actually 300% increase on the same side of the brain. As a matter of fact, what we have here is a cell phone, okay? And when we look at this, this is a little microwave. It's a low-power microwave. And what ends up happening is that if you actually look at these cell phone directories or information, even in iPhones, they said do not hold the cell phone to your body at all times closer than 5/8 of an inch at all. And particular other cell phone companies also said do not hold it closer to 1 inch at all times. What ends up happening is that when you do use these particular cell phones, just 10 minutes of use on a cell phone will increase your brain temperature by 2 degrees. Now, okay, well, I guess, am I out of time?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Well, in any case,
one more minute.
1 more minute, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So basically, what I'd like, like I said, it's unfortunate that I can't really expand on the topic, but it is a fascinating topic. Unfortunately, it affects children a lot more than adults, and affects women more than adults. What ends up happening is that these non-ionizing frequency, they claim is the only way you can cause cancer is by having ionizing radiation, just like gamma rays and so forth. However, non-ionizing radiation can cause certain changes by increasing tissue temperature. Now, we don't know specifically what the long-term effects of constantly exposing your body at an increased temperature. I know as a practicing physician, if I see a child or an adult, if they have high temperatures of 103 or 104, I mean, I basically would have to try to cool that body temperature down as soon as possible. Because literally within minutes, you're actually killing brain cells as time goes along. And what ends up happening is that a lot of times people with uncontrolled fevers, they actually have intractable seizures as the consequences. So, like I said, I'm not a proponent or an opponent to a thing. I just want everybody to know. I just don't feel comfortable not saying anything about the topic, especially I do know something about the topic. Like I said, very quick thing, just go on YouTube, look at something that's Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Very, very brief. Yes, it's, I just wanted to say, I mean, if you want, I've made a very, very brief thing on both sides of copies. If you guys want to look at certain things they looked at specifically, it's actually a lot more involved in this. But in any case, anyone with any questions?
No. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Could I see one of your?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, like I said, some of these things could be biased, but some of them are actual, very factual, but I think it is very, very important, because if you look at studies from big institutions versus studies from independent researchers, big institutions would have a 3 times likely to tell you that cell phone use is safe. However, independent researchers have a 3 times likely of that cell phone use is not safe. What ends up happening now is that there is, right now, a lot of towers are about 10 miles apart from each other because there are new competition with 4G and internet on the cell phone and so forth, these require higher frequencies. And as a result, they're actually trying to put cell phone towers every 2 to 3 miles. So as I stand corrected, I think the nearest cell phone tower to this particular tower is about 3 miles away. So it's not necessarily for safety for cell phone use, but it's for basically internet search on your cell phone.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any more speakers?
I hereby appoint you to research all that stuff and provide us with an executive session.
My name is Lorraine Whitaker, and I live at 6395 Dunville Way, and I have health concerns about this cell phone tower being put up. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers? Okay, then we close public comment. Any more questions for the applicant? Anybody? Okay, close. Anybody have any questions? Matt? Dan?
Nope.
No. Anybody gonna make a motion?
I made the last one, come on.
Step up to the gate? Okay, we'll step up. I move that the Planning Commission approve use permit 1116-15, subject to the findings and conditions of approval found in the staff report.
Second.
Motion, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carry.
Mr. Chairman, can I just make a comment? Dr. Jang, I don't want you to think that anything that you said was not heard or considered. It's just that we're going to be redoing the cell phone ordinance, and one of the issues is you may have heard earlier is that whole 500 feet from a residence deal, and I would suspect that at the time that that's looked at very closely, that's going to be the opportunity to really get into the science of that, because obviously that original ordinance was written at a time when they thought there was some credence to that, and then that's been called into question. It seems to be, as you said, there's science on both sides. So until there's a clear answer to that, I for one don't feel comfortable coming down one side or the other, but just going with the status quo, which is that we've been processing and approving these cell phone towers under the current ordinances. So. But I guess my footnote or my suggestion to staff is that when we do finally get that ordinance out on the table and start looking at it, that the science that exists at that time be one of the things we discuss. Do you guys agree?
Yes.
Yes.
To the extent we can.
Any other discussions?
And, yeah. And we'll look at some other ordinances from other jurisdictions. I don't really know that when we're formulating that ordinance that we're going to want to get into the science, because that's not one of the bases that we can regulate wireless facilities. So by even talking about it, that's really not the reason that we're going to base it between 50 feet, 100 feet, 150 feet, et cetera. It's up to the Planning Commission. I just think that we should go out there and find some ordinances that some other counties have updated recently and see what they've done with the issue.
It's what we always do.
Yeah.
Anybody make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I've got some
All in
couple of
favor?
discussion items before you.
Oh,
And also,
go.
let me just state that this, if anyone wants to file an appeal on this matter, the appeal would have to be filed within 10 days.
okay. So
Just a couple of updates. Number one, we're going to have an EIR scoping meeting for the Roberts Ranch project on March 30th. That's a Monday. I believe it's at 6 p.m. That is not a planning commission meeting. It's a opportunity for the public to come in and inform us as to what kind of issues we should be looking at when we write the EIR for the project. And so it's not a time when we debate the merits of the project. It's a time when we inform the public and listen to the public before we write the environmental document. So I want to let you know if you have any questions about that. Number two.
Be here, Byron.
It'll be here, yes, at 6 p.m. Number two, we are still on target for the next Planning Commission meeting, April 15th, to hear the PV2 Pinot Valley Solar Project. So I encourage you to be here for that one. And then number 3, I'm pleased to report that we need to have a public hearing on the general plan EIR. Now, typically, we don't do these at the planning commission because when we're at the planning commission, you guys want to weigh in on the subject and you want to make sure the public knows you're listening. And so I typically don't involve the planning commission because it's important that the planning commission don't comment at these times. We're just here to listen to the public, comment on the EIR, then staff will respond to those comments, and then we'll bring the entire package to the planning commission. But because it is a general plan, I thought you might want to have it as a planning commission meeting. It would have to be a special planning commission meeting because I didn't want to do it the same night as the PV2 project. So looking at the calendar, looking at the availability of this room and the availability of the consultants, I'm looking at April 20th, which is a Monday, at 7 p.m. to have that meeting, and I wanted your thoughts.
I'll be in New Orleans.
You'll be in New Orleans.
April 20th? I think I'll be in Hawaii. Sorry.
Is there a way?
Yeah, I'll be with
Something about an anniversary.
Go to New Orleans also.
And it isn't necessary that the planning commission is there, and it's not necessary that it be
I think we should.
planning commission meeting, but it is necessary that it happen within the next 45 days. And is there a way, and I need a date by the end of this week, is when I need to set this meeting, because it goes on the published notice that goes to the state for the circulation of the document.
I'm
So
going
I
to be
don't-
gone through from the 16th to the 24th, and any other time that month I can do it.
Do you have to be there? Do you want to be there?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, I'd like to. I mean, if I can't, I can't. I'd like to.
Commissioner Lowe's going to be attending a Dangers of Cellular Towers
He needs
conference in New Orleans.
That's why
so
this pushing it back to 7.
It's really important that she not miss that. Was that your
I
board?
see Ray's looking at his calendar. The 3 of you have any specific time or dates that you know you couldn't make?
Really?
None.
No.
Okay.
June, I can't make.
Neither can I.
Yeah, it's one of those things.
Plug it in and I'll do it if I can.
Okay, well, I'm going to try to find another date
Okay.
between now and, so if you want to let me know after the meeting or when,
Yeah.
when for sure you can't be here, and then I'll try to accommodate it.
Okay.
And the other meeting's on March, what, 30th?
The Roberts Ranch meeting is March 30th.
Here at the plant, at the
Yeah,
same time, 6 o'clock?
yes.
Okay.
So yeah, it's my goal to be able to schedule it at a time when everyone can go. But I will, if I have to, I'll schedule it. I mean, I'll schedule it within that 45 days. It's based on availability of the room. It's based on the availability of the consultant also.
I'll be gone till May 5th.
From when to May 5th?
And looking this up, it looks like the 20th is available. Looks like I'm leaving on the 27th.
Okay.
At least that's what the boss says.
Everybody pulls out their smartphones. Yeah, you get one.
It's more than 5/8 from me, though.
Huh?
I'll hold it over here.
You're going to get thumb cancer, Jeff. Be careful.
It's within an inch.
I'll look at it. I don't think the community would appreciate doing it on a Friday night.
I wouldn't appreciate it
No.
either.
But, because I know that date was open also. I'll look at it and I'll get in touch with you as soon as I can. And, like I said, it's going to be scheduled by Friday because that's when we're going to be sending out the notice of availability for the 45-day review, so.
And the start time at night would probably be later to get the public in?
We're pushing it to a little later than normal, yeah.
7?
We're trying to 7,
Okay.
7, yeah.
And then cumulative impact issues tomorrow in San Jose?
Yes, you and whoever else is going, I believe Michael and I think both planners, both planners are going, and a couple of planning commissioners
Dan's
as
going,
well.
you going, Pat? No? So, okay.
I got the county credit card for lunch, so
Oh, okay, good.
we'll meet you guys at Scott's.
Whoa, I'll tag along.
Anything else?
Nope.
So we should adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second?
It's okay with Byron.
Okay.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
I see your sequel book.
It's all good, Byron.